Good morning, everyone. So, before I begin, I would just like us to give Sister Norma Pimentel another round of applause for the wonderful work that she's done and for her testimony and her witness to the gospel. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the many formation directors here today for calling young religious like myself to be signs of courageous hope in our world and for challenging us to go beyond ourselves. And lastly, I would like to thank the many people and the different organizations who have helped to make this weekend possible. I would like to begin with a story. A few years ago, I saw a motivational video on the internet. And in this video, the speaker is describing a scene that takes place on a beach in the Bahamas. There was a man walking along this beach when he sees this young boy running frantically back and forth between the beach and the ocean. He observed the boy was picking something up off the beach and throwing it back into the ocean. Now, the night before was a lunar tide, and thousands of beautiful starfish had been washed up ashore because the tide was about a foot higher than normal. As the man approached the boy, he realized that the boy was throwing these starfish back into the ocean. The man then asked the boy, "What do you think you're doing?" The boy replies, "I have to get them back into the water. I have to save them." The man then replies, "There are thousands of these starfish. There is no way you can help them. There is no way you can make a difference." The boy then simply picks up a starfish, holds it in his hand, and says, "It matters to this one." And he casts it into the ocean. I'm sure that many of you gathered here today have seen thousands of beautiful starfish washed up on your shores. Catholic Charities of the Rio Grande Valley operates a humanitarian respite center that since its opening in 2014 has served over 100,000 refugees. Over 100,000 refugees. That's a lot of starfish. My own religious community, the Missionaries of the Precious Blood, operate a ministry of reconciliation in the Back of the Yards neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. This neighborhood has been racked by gang and domestic violence, let down by our judicial and governmental structures and systems that are supposed to lift up. Many of the families and youth that are served there have experienced extreme trauma from the presence of violence and death they have experienced, the loss of family and loved ones. Every single day, there are starfish that wash up on the shore of the Reconciliation Center, waiting to be picked up and cast back into the ocean that provides and sustains life. I bring up these two locations, the Humanitarian Respite Center and Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation, because both of these places exemplify what it means to be signs of courageous hope in a world that is fragmented by politics and factionalism and in need of compassion, love, and mercy. In looking at the websites of both of these centers, there are two kinds of commonalities that I would like to talk about. The first being hospitality. One of the key features of hospitality is the creation of safe spaces. The Humanitarian Respite Center serves immigrants who often, after being released from detention centers to await their court hearings, have a place to go. At the Respite Center, they have a place to stay for the night, a new change of clothes, a warm meal, and an opportunity to call their families and loved ones back at home. At Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation, safe spaces are created through talking circles. Within these talking circles, people have the opportunity to gather together with one another and share their experiences of violence, death, and trauma in their lives. The importance of safe spaces is that it allows people to come as they are and to freely and openly express who they are as human persons made in the image and likeness of God. One of my professors and fellow Precious Blood missionary, Father Robert Schreider, in an article titled "The Spirituality of Reconciliation and Peacemaking Mission Today," says that the experience of human hospitality prepares the victim for its divine counterpart, the experience Christians call grace. What this means here is that as we open up ourselves to be more welcoming and hospitable, the grace of God flows through us, grace that works to restore the humanity that was lost. By allowing God's grace to flow through us, we ourselves are transformed by the grace of God, and we become the presence of Christ in our world, sent to be healing and to be mercy. We as ministers, like the boy and the starfish, have a special participation in this restorative work of God. They also strive to enact systemic change to create a more just and equal society that uplifts people rather than oppress and marginalize. This is done in two ways. First, and probably most obvious, is by petitioning our lawmakers to pass legislation that contains just values that promote the common good of all. Second, it is through the sharing of stories with each one of us gathered here today. We have just heard some very powerful and moving stories about the plight of immigrants along the southern border of the United States. These stories are meant to touch our hearts and move us to action. They call on us to do something. Within my own religious community, we talk about responding to the cry of the blood in our world today. This involves opening the ears of our minds and our hearts to listen to the voices that are suffering. It calls us to touch the ugly and festering wounds left by an unjust society, to restore wholeness to what is broken, to cast the starfish back into the ocean. I now turn the magnifying glass on myself. How am I working to embody courageous hope? How am I casting the starfish back into the ocean? This calls for two brief stories. About 3 years ago, at the encouragement of my formators, I had the opportunity to spend 3.5 months in one of our Precious Blood missions in Guatemala. One weekend, we were invited to an ordination that is to the north in Coban. Now, in order to get to Coban from Guatemala City, where I was staying at the time, you have to pass through the mountains. And as we're driving along this mountain pass, I'm captivated by these towering mountains and this crystal clear blue sky in the background. As we're driving a bit further up the road, I see these mounds of garbage that have been dumped on the side of the road. As we get closer, I see these two women that are rummaging through these mounds of garbage, looking for leftover food or other valuables they can find. Suddenly, I'm struck with the thought, oh my God, how is it that I am here, well taken care of, and they're there, digging for scraps? To this day, the image of that beautiful mountainous landscape with these women at the fore is seared in my memory. Why is it that I am here and they are not? The second story also took place while I was in Guatemala. One of our Precious Blood seminarians was going to be ordained a deacon, and on the way to the church where the ordination was going to be held, the director of seminarians turned to me and said, I want to tell you something. A couple days ago, my nephew told our family that he was leaving Guatemala to try to cross into the United States. With tears welling up in his eyes, he says, "We have no idea where he is now, and we're scared for him." I thought to myself, how is it that this person has to risk his life to get to the United States, and all I have to do is go to the customs officer and show him my passport? Where's the justice in that? To this day, I don't know if he successfully made it to the United States or not. After my experience in Guatemala, I felt God was calling me to try and do something to help our immigrant brothers and sisters. This year, for my ministry practicum, I am working at a place called Taller de José, or Workshop of Joseph. It is a resource center that is located in the Little Village neighborhood of Chicago. The mission of Taller de José is to accompany individuals, serving as a bridge to connect them to the health, legal, and social services needed to achieve their goals. Oftentimes, our own institutions are organized in such a way that it can become difficult and often intimidating to navigate in order to achieve our goals. This situation is compounded even more so when you're an immigrant and you cannot understand the language. At Taller de José, we strive to create a safe space where clients can feel safe to share their stories and their struggles with us. We, compañeros, companions, will work to find the correct resources that can best serve our clients' needs. As part of our ministry of accompaniment, we also offer to physically accompany them to these sites so that way they don't have to face these challenges on their own. Just last week, I accompanied a client to downtown Chicago so she could file her paperwork for child support. Now, mind you, I have lived in Chicago a grand total of about 4 years now, and I still get lost whenever I go downtown. So we get off the train and we start walking north on Wabash Avenue. When I look at the GPS on my phone and I'm like, hold on a second, we've been walking in the wrong direction. We need to be going this way. So we finally get to the place where we need to be. The client goes in and spends the next hour and a half working with an assistant to properly fill out and submit her paperwork for her application. As we're leaving, she tells me how nervous she was about going downtown by herself and how grateful she was that she did not have to do this on her own. One more starfish cast back into the ocean. To be signs of courageous hope is to face the reality of brokenness and injustice in our world with compassion, love, and mercy. It is to be resilient when times get tough, to celebrate when the small victories come along. When we see the sheer number of starfish washed up on our shores, it is easy to become overwhelmed and to question whether what we are doing is really making a difference. But courageous hope never fades. Like the boy and the starfish, what we do matters to this one. Thank you.